UiPath is a very important, let's say, partner of Innovation Labs, and also a very important, let's say, beacon of Romania's thriving on tech ecosystem, being a first Romanian unicorn, and of course a very big supporter of the community, of the startup community. It's the third year since UiPath is a partner in Innovation Labs, and also he's supporting university with a lot of classes as well, laboratories and so on and so forth. And for today, we have a presentation that is going to be delivered by Alex from UiPath. Alex is a principal product manager at UiPath. He has an experience of over 17 years, both in software development and product management. So I think you are going to be really interested in his opinion on how actually to build enterprise-grade products, being very customer-centric. So without further ado, I will let Alex begin. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks for the great introduction. Hello, everyone. I'm very excited to be here and to actually have a talk as part of this program. And our subject today is going to be building enterprise-grade applications in a customer-centric way. My take won't be on how to start pitching your product, but what you can expect once you have a decent level of success with your product, what issues and what challenges you'll start to face at that point in time, and what things you can do in advance to make sure that once you face them, well, you maximize your chances of success and don't fall into some of the usual pitfalls. So, on customer centricity, we're going to be focusing on key ways you can ensure that the feedback always reaches the right people within your organization. At some point, you might be overwhelmed by it. At a very early stage, you might be actively looking to just capture it in a way. Another thing, once you have enough feedback, is to make sure that you curate it and properly map it to whatever you want to accomplish. And since this feedback came from real customers that actually are looking for improvements, features, and whatnot within your product, you should always make sure that you incorporate those customers once you ship what you've built based on their idea or based on their suggestion. What I'm going to bind this with is a specific viewpoint on enterprise grade and what enterprise grade means in today's technology landscape. In terms of how to tackle customers related to on-prem and cloud challenges, in case you're still considering building on-prem products, well, look at it again. Well, you should definitely focus on the cloud aspect of it and on cloud consumption models for sure. But depending on the niche or on the segment you'll be addressing with the product, on-prem asks might still be quite relevant even in today's world. How to migrate from a cloud shipped product to true software as a service, and what it means in the customer perception mostly. And how you make sure that this type of cloud delivery that you're basically always shipped to production is being managed right, and how a complete SaaS pipeline can look. Okay, given we do these subjects, what I also want to touch briefly is, well, what qualifies me to basically talk about them with you. So a couple of things about me prior to going to the details. I've been a software engineer. I've been a team lead for software teams, then migrated into project delivery and being an engineering director. While doing that, I was basically part-time doing also the product work on that team, which inevitably led me at some point to basically only doing product anymore, which, yeah, I've been doing now for about 3 to 4 years. What I'm doing in UiPath, I'm with 2 product teams at this point, UiPath Orchestrator is basically the first backend system that was part of the entire UiPath suite. That means the server side that will eventually schedule, execute, and dispatch all the automations that run through UiPath. And the new product that we just launched in February, which we worked on for quite a while, that is called UiPath Solutions, which is basically an umbrella on top of all UiPath services to be able to bundle and model the entire software development life cycle in a coupled manner. My main focuses in Orchestrator, you see them listed here. You might be missing some of the functional topics. That is true. So I've been dealing mostly on solutions with functional aspects, on Orchestrator only non-functional ones. And yeah, believe me, those can be pretty big and challenging themselves. Okay, let's dive into our first topic, which is customer centricity, and as mentioned previously, collecting and structuring feedback. The take on it, just collect, store everything from everywhere, anyhow, it doesn't matter. In the first stage, make sure it never gets lost. You never know when you're going to be looking it up. You never know when you're going to do some statistics on it. And given all the Gen AI enhancements lately, you'll never know when you're going to feed it into an LLM model to basically tell you what it boils down to once you have thousands of such entries. On top of that, make sure you really capture everything, even though you might be tempted to dismiss some items. Mark them in a specific way, but still, capture them. Make sure you really don't lose them. And more important, from a product building perspective, make it easy to receive. Make it easy to receive from within your organization, well, if the organization is big enough, that's going to pose a challenge as well. But make it easy to receive from customers. And basically, the easiest way you can capture it from customers is to make sure that they can give it to you while using your product exactly when they encounter it. Because otherwise, well, they'll just deal with something else and never share it with you. Okay, getting to the curation part. I won't touch the LLM subject, even though that's quite an interesting one. It's something that usually works pretty much out of the box in terms of summarizing and understanding what's being perceived by an LLM as being a top ask. But prior to that, assign them to relevant areas, right? All those asks will be spread, well, through everything, infrastructure, functionality, SLAs, whatever. Just group them, assign them to the proper products in case you have a suite or you basically have 3 main functionalities, always map them. Whenever you get a certain type of feedback that's repetitive or that comes up often enough, but it's not necessarily something you fully relate to, you start building some assumptions and well, the scientific area of product research comes in to help here to fill your gaps by actually actively approaching customers, potential customers, or prospects, or really just performing user research and get the missing link that you couldn't infer from the feedback you received. And yeah, your existing customers are probably the best advisors. Whenever, well, any app that you use on their phones sends you a random survey, well, you might click on it, you might not. But if they would invite you to actively give them feedback in form of, say, dollar voting. Dollar voting is an exercise where you get $100, a gazillion features, and you basically put your money where your mouth is, right? This way, you can make sure that it's not just going to be an impulsive feedback or prioritization decision that's being asked for, but the one that actually customers eventually will be ready to pay for. Well, inclusive rollout. Inclusive rollout means don't just put your implementation in front of the customer when it's ready and you consider it actually shipped, and then start incrementing from there. You can share things a lot earlier, especially with the ones that bought up this type of asks. You can share them with them and, well, ensure that actually you will effectively address their ask with what you aim at implementing, right? So you can share design mocks, anything with selected customers. Another way to tackle this part on top of drafts at a later stage is basically make an alpha feature available to some of the customers who you know are friendly, who will give you the feedback early, and that you can leverage in this way. You can do dedicated previews, privates one, where you just have a few selected ones as potential sign-up ones, or you can even make it public, which actually helps you because you don't actually declare your feature as GA, so you basically still have all the levers in your hand to still retract it if there's no fit. You have all your levers in your hand to say whatever has been built up until now will not be supported going forward because the feature wasn't GA yet, right? It was there for your customer to experience it firsthand and to share feedback with you. One personal note or one personal takeaway of inclusive rollout is to incentivize, right? There's an implicit incentive for customers to say, well, if I check that feature out, if I'm happy, if I see that the team takes my feedback into account, I will be more open to give it again and to interact more. On top of it, you can even think of in-product incentives to further leverage it. If you're a top star contributor in terms of feedback, you might, well, get something off, get something free, get something in advance, make it something that's only time-bound for customers to check out. And, well, last but not least, because you eventually want adoption for those features, the incentive that you pose right at the start is a one-off chance, right? You're only going to launch that feature once, regardless of how many subsequent marketing activities you do around it. It's only going to be launched once, and that's where you want it to make an impact, right? It's like making a good second impression to someone. Okay, this is the part on customer centricity that I wanted to touch, and we're going to be moving to enterprise grade and how we can make sure that whatever we ship is being perceived as enterprise grade by potential customers. I believe the first phrase nailed it. Cloud is, well, as you all know and all you see in your phones and basically also in enterprise software by now, in case you experience it, well, cloud is kind of undoubtedly the future. Whoever has real concerns about it is only creating features in the backlog on the companies that aim at addressing those, right? Whenever a customer comes to us and says, okay, well, I don't have this functionality available on the cloud because in on-prem I have, well, DB access on my server, well, it's not a problem. We're going to figure out the functionality to give that to you on cloud as well. So you'll have absolutely no reason to stick with on-prem. And this is mostly where the entire industry is moving now. Cloud has many flavors. You have quite big software companies that aim at creating dedicated cloud instances for customers. I don't know, like the big ERP systems today. And you have the nimble approach where you want to deliver in SaaS, which I'll be going into detail on the topic about true SaaS. The adoption curve on cloud, once you're there, will inevitably benefit you. You know that on-prem customers are basically stuck in a legacy way of going full test deployment, having multiple backups in place, having multiple systems in place to have a fallback and so on, which is basically what you, with a proper SaaS cloud deployment, are taking away from them. You're basically taking so much headache away from them, there's really no reason for them to keep on dealing with that headache, unless, well, they're masochistic or something. So eventually it's going to become clear to them as well. really, well, frictionless rollout and time to market is a great benefit for you. Whenever you want to ship new things, this is the only way you'll ensure those are still there. We still have customers who are on versions released in 2018, 2017. Imagine them asking about us fixing things. Well, they're on a not supported version for 5 years. So unless there's really a big monetary incentive, you can't really help them. And then at some point, nobody will know that code base anymore to put anything on top of it. And yeah, the main stakeholder that's going to be a challenge for you to convince when pushing for adoption is IT, SecOps, security, and however it's called on the customer end, where most of the concerns will be raised. Because up until now, they basically can air gap whatever deployment you give them. And from this point onwards, they will not anymore. And there's plenty of companies who are, well, very reluctant to accept this reality. But we do see that more and more end up needing to ride this wave because otherwise they're simply not getting what they want. And basically they lose another competitive edge against their competitors by just not having it. What do I mean by true SaaS? By true SaaS, I mean a system where the customer will only interact with it through an interface, APIs, events. They basically don't host it, they don't touch the runtime, they don't touch a database, they don't touch nothing. Even though they are in this setup, it's important to ensure that this is what you're aiming for, if you aim for this, because there are multiple flavors and customers might believe you might set up a dedicated environment for them on Azure or AWS, which would be a different approach than this one. And yeah, the table stakes that will always be brought up in these scenarios are performance, scalability, security, data sovereignty. Why isn't my data hosted in Europe? Why are your AWS regions here and there? This will always come up because previously in on-prem it was fully under their control. Now it's under yours and you have to cover it properly for them. And what this will force you to do is to inevitably stay up to date with all the latest and greatest in terms of cloud offerings, because customers will push you to do that. So once you bring them to this delivery model, if they find out Azure published a new, more secure Key Vault version that you don't support, where you store their secrets, they will insist of you having to cover that pretty fast, right? So it's also going to be an internal push to always ship the latest and greatest. Well, how to properly ship it? The first take here is to stay in tune with your numbers. Why stay in tune with your numbers? Because at some point you might make an early assumption that a certain utilization rate is going to touch your product, while if you actually manage to break the barrier and scale your product, this can blow out of proportions faster than you can believe it. You might have built it in a way initially, but you should always track your performance curve and always track how fast your load on your cloud environment is growing. We do that and sometimes, well, we don't even believe what happens there. So yeah, it can be very revealing to always have an eye on it. What you have to do is also to cover your back, right? There's always potential for misusing it. I can think of something easy such as API rate limiting and think even more complex. If you have an on-prem system, API rate limiting, well, your system will just hang and you did that. If you have a multi-tenant cloud environment without API rate limiting and somebody bombards your server, it will not affect just that tenant, but actually all your customers, which is something you have to avoid, right? And yeah, in case you ship a product suite, you need to fully understand and embrace your deployment model so that you can ship across products. As an example, in our case, apart from internal alpha and staging environments, which are cross-region, community environments, again, cross-regions, 8 or 9 regional environments, and between these 9 deployment rings, you always have a lag between 1 week and 1 day, depending on the stage. Whenever you find an incident, the entire sprint deployment cycle gets suspended, not just for one product, but for all its dependencies, hopefully as automatic as possible. If I were to also name a takeaway that I want you to have from the session, is ensure that both enterprise-grade engineering and, well, customer-centric product shipment and customer relations and marketing and pitching go well with each other, right? They usually don't. In terms of priorities, engineering wants to make sure that things stay secure, safe, and they run, while product marketing and sales will always push for more and more and more. How can we nurture empathy between, well, these two targets? First of all, in case there are engineering incidents on production, make sure also the counterpart is present, because that will actually make a lasting impact on them, and they will ensure they will not push anymore for a, well, way too fast rollout that's actually impacting production environments. Taking it from the other angle, in case you have a customer escalation in terms of, well, undelivered functionality or misuse, get engineering on board, let them also see the pain that, well, the product usage causes to customers. I guarantee they'll come up with very interesting solutions to the problem at hand. And since I brought up previously design-conducted product research and how your users are actually using the products that you ship, have both product and engineering assist, and they'll be mind-blown in terms of, well, how hard a button can be located on a screen, or even how an obvious functionality is all of a sudden not obvious anymore, and people get easily lost into what you wanted them to accomplish. Okay. I hope I managed to give you a brief glimpse into these two aspects, and also got you interested in actually nurturing this type of product and engineering interaction. And yeah, I believe we can open it up to Q&A.
Great. Thank you so much. Let's give a round of applause. Good. So I believe we can start with some questions from the audience, and as well we are keeping an eye on the questions from online. So whenever you're ready, just raise your hand, and we can start discussing a bit. Okay. We have only one mic? Or? Okay. Until.
So in your presentation, you focused mainly on how to switch from on-prem deployment to cloud deployment, but our startup needs to have a switch from cloud to on-prem in order to secure the user data. How fast would that switch be, and is there any reliable way to guarantee the same data safety on cloud as in on-prem?
So, I hope you don't end up moving the data from cloud to on-prem to ensure just that ask, because there's definitely plenty of ways on cloud to ensure the same data safety you can ensure in on-prem, right? This can be something as simple, in case you have a dedicated cloud deployment, as database level encryption via customer managed AKVs. You can have application level encryption that comes on top of your business data, where you basically end up classifying the sensitive data that is being stored in your system, and that actually never gets up and clear in the database, right? It comes with some downsides, such as searchability, but that can be addressed as well via dedicated search implementations. I hope you don't end up doing this, right? It seems like an easy way out for that ask, but believe me, you can fully cover it on cloud. It might not meet your requirements at this point in terms of effort to cover it on cloud, or might imply application redesign, but I would strongly suggest that you at least explore and are fully aware on what capabilities are available to you on the cloud prior to taking this decision and making the product available in on-prem. Please.
Oh, sure. You can say it and I'll repeat it.
So, do companies like enterprise clients actually trust your cloud infrastructure with their data safety? Because we didn't think that
They do. So there are plenty of certifications behind in order to make sure that it's trustable, right? There's also a big initiative of ours at this point to make our entire cloud FedRAMP compliant into the US, to be able to actually host public sector US on the cloud. Not to mention we have entities from within Europe that are public sector entities that are cloud hosted, like, I don't know, some of the ministries from Ireland for sure. Yeah, and well, even
Even in
medical.
Romania, actually, so yeah, we have a few clients.
Even medical, and there are medical specific certifications on data security. So for a startup level idea, that might be super hard to obtain right from the get-go, right? But research them, even though you do the on-prem implementation, so that in the future you would know how you can touch those on cloud as well.
Okay, great, thank you, great question. We have one there, and I just, I have in my mind, it's fine. So we can go with that.
Yeah, it's my turn. Thank you. Hi, my name is Denisa, and I have a curiosity, actually a question. It's not related to your presentation, but I was wondering at UiPath as a product manager, how do you prioritize innovation when you are starting a new project? Like you want to deliver with what you have already, or you save some time to innovate? Because I know that you guys innovate a lot, and I'm wondering how you are doing that.
It's probably different team by team, okay? There's no cross-product process on how we tackle innovation. Frankly, in my case, there's so much stuff flying around, it's hard not to, and still do your work decently, which is probably, well, a lucky situation to be in. But ideas will flow in, both from customers and internally, and it's then basically up to you to figure out which one is worthy to be selected and to be prioritized.
Cool. We have one here in the third row.
Hello. So you mentioned earlier about working as a developer as well as a product manager, I assume also product owner, if that's correct?
Somewhat.
Okay. My question is, how can you separate these contexts? I mean, you know, because as a developer, you tend to go really in depth when you're working on something, on a task or on a feature. But as a project owner or a project manager, you have to fall back and see the bigger pictures of the whole product you're working on. So my question is, how do you separate this concern and make sure you're not biased by the work you're doing as a developer?
So, in my past job, when I was doing both these two roles, well, luckily, from some point onwards, my hands-on or super in-depth coding experience was really not there anymore, right? Probably last time I coded was 2012. So basically, by dealing with a delivery team that was large enough, I was already scoped out from the details. That probably allowed me to do this transition easier and to try to keep my distance from those specifics, even though I had to understand those and basically figure out how to do trade-offs. But still, while doing only product, engineering will detail all the necessary trade-offs they will take in order to implement a feature for you, and you would still need to understand those, because otherwise you'll just say, well, just implement it and then everything crashes. And, well, it's in nobody's interest to end up there.
Okay, thank you.
I think we had one in the middle.
So, keeping everything in mind that was said today, I want to ask you, how does a new project at UiPath reach from the very beginning, from the very early steps, until success? What is, let's say, a roadmap that is usually in place for that?
Wow, that would be an entire talk, by the way, and that's a good topic for an entire talk. So, actually, first of all, it's very similar to what you are facing during this problem. You gotta pitch it, you gotta find sponsors internally, depending on the size, right? If it's really a new product. Solutions, for instance, was such a new product that had to be pitched. You had to have super stakeholders on board. You have to make it a company-wide initiative. You had to make basically your revenue plan that you plan to hit with it in advance prior to even, well, starting the product spec work in figuring out how you're going to implement it and actually getting that engineering funding, design funding to do everything. Let's assume you get it started and you also get it finished, right? The fun part is getting it released is probably just the beginning, as painful as it sounds. It's the reality you will even face with your ideas as well in the future. Getting it released is just the first step. Once you get it released, people touch it, you get even further requests. You will have to have thought in advance of all the metrics that you want to measure post-release so that you can objectively say a month, 3 months, or 6 months after if you hit your targets or not, and not make up targets as you go, because then, well, you'll make them up in a way you hit them. And in case you don't touch them, even figure out, well, what hasn't been done right and how you can do corrective actions to hit those targets. And that's basically just the first post-GA iteration, assuming that you, well, have a yearly or bi-yearly release cadence with that product going forward. You will continue to do that with every release. So basically, well, shipping and then basically measuring that it had the impact needs to be baked into your product and your process.
Okay, if I might have a follow-up
Sure.
on that. It's very interesting what you said, and am I correct in assuming that until the tech-wise work actually begins, there is a lot of stuff to be figured out and a lot of time passes by until it gets to that point?
So it's maybe 6+ months.
6 months. Wow. Interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So coming up with an idea that you can secure everything for it to start while working on it. If it's not something small in under 6 months, I mean, well, maybe if the company is small enough, but from some point onwards, probably not anymore.
Thank you. And we have also one question from online. So how can you spot any misissues of APIs in order to stop any data leaks? Very, very specific, but yeah.
So, yeah, you can. So this is basically where cloud really helps you, right? Out of the box, if you were to code any API audit, you're very soon going to see that the throughput you end up logging there is huge. Searchability and data reconnaissance is also close to impossible. What we use is mostly Azure App Insights, which will, based on how much money you put behind it, literally keep everything that has ever flown through your system, so that whenever you figure out, based on some statistics, that this happened, you know exactly which customer when, with what usage pattern. Then you'll get your sales team to contact that customer, set up a meeting with them, understand their use case. If it's extremely service affecting, you can block them. You can block them temporarily. You need to figure out how to deal with it, especially if it also has negative impact on other customers because they're hosted in the same environment.
So how do you manage expectations from customers? Like, for example, how do you gracefully reject a feature request? Or how do you make them understand that, well, you're not going to customize every product? I know it's an interesting question. I was just curious for your perspective.
No, it's an interesting question. I can tell you the reality, and I'm sure you'll find plenty of alternative approaches to it. One thing that I specifically enjoy at my job at this point compared to previous ones where topics like this always came up, right? Is that we say we do no commitments in advance on what we ship to who and when. It's either part of a planning release cycle or not, and even if it is, due to the right reason, it can even fall off. If there's significantly more money behind other initiatives, yours will still fade, and I tell you this in advance. This is part of the non-commitment we make, and we say we always implement what's more important for the product itself. Okay, so that's the first part. And then the second part is living up to the fact that you prioritize, apart from revenue impact, doing things that are sane for your product and doing things that you implement not for customer X, because you seriously believe that once implemented, it has the potential to be adopted by everyone. Because otherwise you're just creating niches your product attempts to address.
So from what I understand, you basically focus on making the best product possible, and who aligns with it will eventually buy it.
Right, so indeed, yeah, that's a nice thing to, that's a nice way to put it. Even though making the best product possible with all the initiatives that you have behind, those will be prioritized based on expected revenue impact. That can be positive in terms of, well, additional one, but it can also be negative in terms of lost customers because I don't do the feature for them. If you really rely on a customer, you'll probably not want to lose it because you don't do a feature. But if you reach a certain scale, if a customer really ditches you because you don't do a feature that you know nobody else will use, do you really want to be in business with them? So yeah, this is why I believe the job that I'm doing at this point is privileged from this perspective, and it's definitely not always the case.
Okay. Other questions? Do we have anything from online as well? Okay. Okay. We're okay with the time, but we can still take one more question since we still have 5 minutes to break.
So, any curiosity you guys have about doing this job at UiPath? Please.
Thank you. How would you handle situations where customers want conflict with internal priorities?
Where customer want conflict with internal priorities?
Yeah, so the customer's feedback, what they wish the brand would do, conflicts with what the brand actually wants to do.
Well, it depends. You basically have to be very aligned in either believing you know what you want to do. By the way, you should always be flexible here, right? The market might prove it's better for you to actually change your mind, right? That's one takeaway. If you firmly believe you don't want to push your product into that business, then do your research and basically stand your ground. But make sure, even while standing your ground, you are flexible enough in understanding if it really makes sense, if there's enough money behind it, if it actually opens some doors for your product in the future, or it's, well, just some random ass because that customer relies on a different vendor that you don't support, right?
Right.
We face this quite often. This is a special category for us, right? For on-prem, for instance, if you support database X, why don't you support the other 17? Well, great question, but I don't want to support 17. Well, the cost of doing that is just insane. This will happen even for cloud integrations. If you support 2 free security providers while there's another 25 out there, will you support all of them? Is that the strategy? Do you want to be a security provider integrator? I don't know. Maybe. Is there enough market behind? And so on. We have plenty of integrations with, say, market leaders. We usually pick we're not just picking one, we usually pick one to three suppliers or integrations that we support, and if they get bought up, phased out, or whatever, we might reassess that support list. For instance, for supported database versions, we stick with just one, and we don't want to change that.
All right, thank you.
Any other question? Last call. Okay. We have a very active middle of the class.
It's not about today's presentation, is that all right? It's a curiosity one.
Can you please repeat?
It's not about today's presentations, it's a curiosity.
It's about, yeah, of course, it's about your path, his role,
Oh,
today's
perfect.
presentation, everything you
Okay.
want to ask, of course.
Nice. So you said that you were a software engineer and now you are in a management position. I was wondering, would you encourage people to make, let's say, this kind of career development from being a developer to actually getting into a management position?
Into a management position or into a product management position?
Both. Why not?
Okay, there's just two answers to it. Into a management positions in terms of leading teams, it's basically your choice. Yes, if you're a fan of it, but make sure you stay in touch with actual engineering, because there will be inevitably a point where your team is big enough that you'll actually end up being out of touch, right? And then basically this is the path you embark on. So, well, a lot of people don't tell it to you in advance, but you'll eventually end up noticing it. When talking about product management, I firmly believe that having had, or all people that have a very solid technical background in terms of hands-on delivery, actually having felt all the implementation pain that you're going to cause to your development team forever going onwards as a product manager, if you felt that firsthand, you will empathize better, and you will also know how to handle things so that you strike a correct balance between, well, pushing for feature implementations and actually having really accomplishable but, well, hard to accomplish targets, right? You don't want to set easy targets for your engineering team, for sure. And you guys are not setting easy targets for yourself either in life, so yeah, it's basically the same. So that helps a lot. Diving very early in product is also an option. I have colleagues that have been very successful this way as well. Yeah, I have to call them naturals. I couldn't have done it when I was your age, probably.
Great. So I think we're okay also with the time. So thank you so much, Alex, for your time, and let's give him a round of applause.
Thank you.